That would be by Sheri, about disabilities and colonizing space.
All right. So I apologize for all my background rumbling. I'm at the conference, but the laundry machine is going. It's one of those 2020 things. So my presentation is kind of a playground in possible worlds, I think. But the more I thought about it, the more I think it might really happen. So, it depends. Like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I think this is never going to happen. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'm pretty sure it will. So I guess this is Wednesday, so I don't know. So here's my story. Here is the ride I would like to take you on. So space is very dangerous, and by dangerous I don't mean that the danger of dying, like the danger of decompression and all that kind of things, the danger of being destroyed on launch. When I talk about how space is always trying to kill you, is the disability that happens and the injury and the sort of low grade, long-term medical problems that happen in low Earth orbit. So I'm mostly talking here. I'm mostly talking here about low Earth orbit, about Earth orbit. Though I think that I'm willing to say that these are also planetary issues, but I haven't thought about that as much. Okay, so once you get a bunch of people in space, corporations, being what corporations are, will start to have two different kinds of jobs. We'll start to have the important jobs like doing the science or running or pilots or whatever our important people are, the white collar jobs. And then we'll still also need people to take out the trash and do the cooking and wipe things down and do all the maintenance that right now the people aboard the ISS have to do both those kinds of works, right? They have to be the doctors and the scientists, and they also have to be kind of the janitors. So eventually, with lots of people in space, those two different kinds of jobs will split, and different kinds of people will have them, and we'll pay obviously the important people a lot, and we'll pay the other people not so much. And these blue collar space jobs are probably going to be pretty terrible. So they'll probably be kind of long hours because, again, you don't want to have more people than you need. So the people you do, the people who are up there are going to have to work hard. And they'll be dangerous jobs. They'll be high risk. And honestly, they're going to be no fun because after you get over it, I think you'll get over it pretty quickly. After you get over wow, I'm in Earth orbit. That's cool. I can look out the window. There's Earth. You're still going to be bored. You're still going to have your backache and your rash and your nausea and all the kinds of low grade physical problems that you have in space. I mean, we see this from the diaries and the biographies and autobiographies of astronauts. They're bored. They actually are kind of bored, kind of a lot, and they're not always having a great time. So we've got these folks who go up into Earth orbit to work and do menial jobs for not very much pay. So who's going to take those kinds of jobs? Corporations, being the kind of things that corporations are, they're going to start thinking, well, who wants this crap job? It's going to be kind of terrible. It's going to be boring. It's going to be hard work. And you could end up permanently disabled if you take this job. So one of the things, when I worked in Puerto Rico, one of the things I noticed was that a lot of my students who were the good students who tried hard, but were from the poorest households, ended up in things like the National Guard because there was a job and they took it. So one of the groups that I would expect that would take these jobs are chronically unemployed or underemployed folk. So in my talk on YouTube, I talked about the unemployment rates in the disability community. So if you're on the autistic spectrum, your unemployment rate could be as high as 85%. If you're blind, it's as high as 70%. If you just have some other kind of disability, the best chance you've got is that the unemployment rate will be twice the national average, and that's in the United States. So all bets are off in other places. So one of the groups of people that corporations might advertise for, and we could have parties about the ethics of this, but one of the people who would be desperate enough to take these jobs, and one of the groups that they might the corporations might go after is disabled folk. Okay, because for one thing, super severe economic stress, even in developed countries. For another thing, I personally am not really all that worried about the changes in the small changes in vision that occur in low Earth orbit. Who cares? You get a little farsighted, does not affect my day. And also there are other folks with mobility concerns who might think that zero gravity is really cool. There are also folk on the autistic spectrum who might think that that boring job where things are kind of always the same, the people never change, the routine never changes, where I might find that rage inducing or numbing. Folk on the autistic spectrum might find that to be kind of a cool thing. So you've got these folk on the disability spectrum, these disabled people, and they think, okay, I'll take this job, it's cool. So once you get all these people on the space colony, then you've got the minor concern, and it really is a minor concern, of making the job accessible. So we could have all the jobs in the United States, pretty much most of them. We could pretty much make all these things accessible without too much fuss. It's not a big deal, but we would have to do it in order to get our, to have the janitorial staff. They need access to might need to label your cleaning detergents or whatever. It's the minor differences, especially because you have no transportation needs, right? You're just at work, which is kind of nice. Okay, so you make those jobs accessible and everything is good. And then one of the things that might happen is the folk who come to the low Earth orbit to do the white collar jobs or as tourists might start thinking, oh, so like the janitor's end of the habitat is accessible. Why can't mine be accessible as well? So it'd be no big deal. You just make the whole thing that spreads, right? And the whole habitat becomes accessible. Then, and this is a chain of events, but I don't know why it wouldn't happen. You have folk on Earth who start thinking, oh, so I have to go all the way to outer space, huh, to get an accessible job. How about I have that here? So we might start to see some transfer. We often see transfer of technology from the space industry to Earth. And in this case, we might see transfer of attitude from the space colony to Earth. We also, by the way, would have to have things like the safety equipment accessible, which it often isn't on Earth right now, right? So like the fire extinguishers and stuff aren't labeled and are not always like at wheelchair height. There's all that kind of stuff. So, so you might find that there's kind of a weird trickle up accessibility boom because you've got these disabled people in space working these junk jobs. And I feel like it's conceivable that that can make everything better. And I think that's the abstract. Now I'll stop there.
Okay, so Sheri, I'm going to ask a real quick question to start us off. Since you and I and Jim have been around and around about this kind of stuff a couple of times, at the very beginning, you said something like, you really have in mind low Earth orbit. I just wanted to make sure I got that right, because if that's the case, then I have a lot fewer problems with some of this. Is that is what you meant?
I'm talking about low Earth orbit today, but I feel like I mean it for Mars and the moon also, because no matter what you do, disabled people are going to happen. I mean, you can go ahead and modify bodies and you can go ahead and do whatever you're going to do, but as long as you've got people in a dangerous situation, disability and disease are going to happen. And so you can either chuck those people out the airlock once they become disabled, or you're really not going to be able to let them just hang out and be disabled, right? They're going to have to keep working. So if you've got a body in space or a body on a colony, that person is going to have to keep working. So yeah, I'm talking about low Earth orbit because it's Wednesday and that's kind of where I started, but I mean it for planets too.
Okay, good. We still have something to disagree about. All right.
Okay, good.
Did you just call on me, Kelly?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I only heard half of my name. Love your talk, Sheri. Right on. And thank you for calling out that worn out macho trope, the right stuff. it's not only macho, of course, as you understand very well, it's very exclusionary. And I know in Jim's talk, he's going to talk about the need to maximize inclusion rather than minimizing it. And that's no matter what kind of pretty pictures NASA will show you, it's still pretty exclusionary. As you mentioned, the cost of putting people into low Earth orbit, I don't think we will ever know the true cost of putting a human being into low Earth orbit. And consequently, you can extend that into the future, putting people on other planetary bodies. So thanks so much for your talk. And I put this note in chat, but I'll tell you again, your stats on unemployment rates for disabled people are appalling, just appalling in the United States. Shame on us.
Well, it's actually quite a lot better than it used to be. So, I mean, it's appalling, yeah, but I find reason to be comforted.
Thanks.
Okay, Carlos? Can't hear you, Carlos. Can't hear you, Carlos. I don't think you're muted, but something wrong with your mic.
Can you hear me now?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Okay, I switched microphones. My other one doesn't work. Yeah, thank you, Sheri. I find a lot about your talk really convincing. I agree with you that for a lot that people with disabilities are going to be good fits for a lot of jobs in space. Where I might disagree with you is you have a lot of optimism about society that I don't share. So for a long time in the 20th century, economists predicted that economic pressures enough would end things like segregation in businesses and racial and gender biases in hiring, right? Because as a business person, it doesn't serve your economic interests to have these biases or to have segregation. You're not hiring the best person for the job if you have racial or gender biases. But what we saw was it didn't work, right? The economic pressures were not enough to end segregation. There had to be top-down political movement there. And things like racial and gender biases in hiring are still going strong today, despite all sorts of business people being trained in business school about how to make the most money possible. And so I suspect the same thing will be true in space, that bias and prejudice against people with disabilities will be an impediment to the vision you have coming into practice without some sort of top-down pressure on whoever is sending people up into low Earth orbit or wherever to include people with disabilities. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so what I usually say at the end of every talk that I give is, listen, people, the patriarchy is not going to burn itself down. So that's our job. And so I think that you're exactly right, but I would differ in that I don't have a lot of faith in top-down mandates for inclusion. What I do have tons of faith in is people's direct action, right? Is militating and activism from the grassroots. So I think that you're right, it won't happen all by itself. Probably the first time 6 people with disabilities apply for these jobs, the companies will lose their shit. They will just be like, you can't do that. Those people can't go to space. My God, what are you even thinking? But once they're there, I think it'll turn out fine. But I agree with you that it's not just going to happen nice like cupcakes. It's going to happen because people force it to happen.
Okay, Eric? Eric Hughes, did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I probably didn't put my hand down again.
Okay.
I can say something, but I don't need to monopolize the conversation.
All right. Does anybody else want to weigh in here? Make a comment or ask a question? Going once?
You all just believe me, right? Hooray.
No, that is not what's happening. At least At least there's one person here that has some serious disagreements, but I don't want to rehash stuff that we've already done in print. So, okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll move on.